Reading from the Dukeries of Nottinghamshire by Roger A. Redfern. Welbeck Park and Abbey. Welbeck belonged anciently to the manor of Cuckney held by Sweyn, a Saxon overlord, but after the Norman conquest was given to Hugh Fitzbaldric. It was Thomas de Cuckney who founded the great Premonstratensian Abbey of St. James, completed in 1153. In 1539, this religious house was dissolved by Henry VIII and granted to Richard Whalley. Through marriage, the estate passed to the third son of Bess of Hardwick, Sir Charles Cavendish, whose son was William Cavendish, the famous horseman created Duke of Newcastle upon Tyne in 1665. A great royalist, William Cavendish had earlier entertained King Charles I at Welbeck and his other local property, Bolsover Castle. He died in 1676 and was succeeded by his son Henry. 2 generations later, Lady Henrietta Cavendish Hollis, Countess of Oxford, was the owner of the estate. It was her daughter, Lady Margaret Cavendish Harley, who married the 2nd Duke of Portland in 1734. From that date, Welbeck has been the major seat of the Dukes of Portland of the family of Bentinck from the Netherlands province of Overijssel. The 3rd Duke of Portland was Prime Minister in 1783 and between 17 and... Forgive me. The 3rd Duke of Portland was Prime Minister in 1783 and between 1807 and 1809. He was succeeded by his son, who, as the 4th Duke, was Lord Privy Seal in 1827 and was also a scientist responsible for changes in the construction of gunboats, and a notable farmer who created the water meadows alongside the River Morn at Clipston from unproductive heath. It was the 4th Duke who had erected in 1844 the great Archway Lodge in the forest between Edwinstowe and Clipston, a romantically sited replica of the 14th century gatehouse of Worksop Priory. He had 4 sons and 5 daughters. None of the sons ever married, but the 3 youngest became the 3 best-known brothers of the Victorian age. The eldest son died at the age of 28 years, before his father. The second became the 5th Duke of Portland and the most celebrated mystery man and recluse of the last century. The 3rd son was Lord George Bentinck, statesman and racing addict, and the 4th son was Lord Henry Bentinck, one of the best known of hunting men who had a profound knowledge of hound breeding. The 5th Duke of Portland was a handsome and generous man who, as he grew older, developed an exaggerated shyness. He withdrew from the limelight, a difficult thing for a member of the nobility to do at any time. Like his illustrious ancestor Bess of Hardwick, he had a passion for building, and from his succession in 1854 until death in 1879, spent colossal sums of money in developments at Welbeck, most of which are luckily extant. It may be that because he wished to be alone, so many of his building projects took place underground. A suite of 3 library rooms, 236 feet long, a chapel 170 feet long, later converted to a ballroom, and airy tunnels. These unique underground rooms were heated by hot air and illuminated by many thousands of gas lights. The library on its own contained 1,100 gas lights. A 1¼ mile long tunnel crossed Welbeck Park from the south lodge of the Worksop Manor estate to the stables near Holbeck, passing beneath the Welbeck Abbey complex. The tunnel remains, dry and well ventilated, as a memorial to the 5th Duke's character. He could be driven in his coach from home almost to the edge of Worksop, unseen by his employees and other local inhabitants. The irony was that despite his lavish building programme and immense wealth, the 5th Duke occupied but 3 or 4 rooms at Welbeck. The rest of the mansion lay empty or stacked with countless treasures. When he died at his London house in December 1879, the dukedom went to his first cousin once removed, William John Arthur Charles James Cavendish Bentinck, son of Lieutenant General Arthur Bentinck. The sixth Duke was almost 22 years old when he succeeded and moved to Welbeck Abbey at once, with his stepmother, later created Baroness Bolsover, and stepbrothers and sisters. They found the great house surrounded by masses of building material and rubble, and only a handful of rooms fit for habitation. The sixth Duke of Portland remained at Welbeck for more than 63 years, through 5 reigns, and brought the estate to a fine condition. Those were the golden years of Welbeck, when the most famous people of the age came and went, enjoying great hospitality from the Duke and Duchess, the former Winifred Dallas York. The sixth Duke was a great horseman, and fabulous stables and riding school, erected by his eccentric predecessor, were fully utilised. The Great Riding School is the second largest in the world, and lies close to the stables between the West Drive leading from the works up Mansfield Road. One of the uses made of this great building was to house the large congregations at Welbeck Tenants Agricultural Society luncheons. The sixth Duke will long be remembered for his great humanity as a landlord. Likewise, the public spiritedness of Winifred, Duchess of Portland. She was particularly concerned with the welfare of the sick and injured. The orthopaedic hospital at Harlow Wood, south of Mansfield, came into being in 1929 as a direct result of the efforts of the Portlands, as did many other institutions and schemes for the welfare of children, minors, and soldiers. When the sixth Duke died in 1843, he was succeeded by his eldest son, William Arthur Henry, Marquess of Titchfield. The seventh Duke of Portland continues at Welbeck. He was born in March 1893 and in 1915 married the Honourable Ivy Gordon Lennox, who was maid of honour to Queen Alexandra between 1912 and 1915. As the Marquess of Titchfield, he built a large modern house in 1930 to 32 at the place called Roomwood, a mile to the northeast of Welbeck Abbey. It is a commanding viewpoint looking out over the wide sweep of park, and as a point of interest, it is the place from which the young Arthur Cavendish Bentinck, soon to become the sixth Duke of Portland, was shown Welbeck Abbey and the Great Lake by the 7th Viscount Galway while out hunting with the latter's hounds in 1877. The 7th Duke did not move from his modern house, called Welbeck Woodhouse, on the death of his father in 1943. Winifred, Dowager Duchess of Portland, continued to live in the south-facing Oxford wing of Welbeck Abbey until her death in 1954. The great house might at this time have followed so many notable mansions in this part of the country and been reduced in size or fallen into decay. Happily, a large part of the abbey was taken over as a sixth form boarding school, preparing entrance for cadetships at the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. It was opened in 1953, and old Welbeckians are now serving as officers in the Royal Engineers, the Royal Corps of Signals, and other technical regiments throughout the world. About 150 boys attend the college at one time, and it is run as a boarding school, not as a military unit. Undoubtedly, the creation of Welbeck College has preserved the great house and saved it from the sad decline or sudden end, so typical of so many mansions in the Dukeries and adjacent districts. Welbeck Woodhouse is still the home of the 7th Duke and Duchess of Portland and their eldest daughter, Lady Anne Cavendish Bentinck. It can be seen as one travels the Cuckney-Ollerton Road, the A616, more than 2 miles to the north, a long, pale frontage supported by stands of great deciduous trees. The Welbeck estate extends to about 3,000 acres, and its beautification in the late 18th century is largely the work of Humphrey Repton. Up to that time, most of the park was rough and scruffy. We can readily imagine its early appearance by looking at parts of the uncultivated forest outside the great estates. It would have been a scrubby heathland dominated by silver birch and bracken, with a few great oaks remaining from the original forest of the Middle Ages. Much of the Grand Manor landscaping, some of the finest in England, dates from Repton's modifications. The Great Lake is really the focal point of Welbeck Park, created by Repton during his landscaping. The Little Millwood Brook drains southeastwards through the park to join the River Poulter near Norton Village. Here, a relatively small dam was all that was necessary to hold back the waters of the Millwood Brook and create the 2.5 miles long Great Lake. From most points of view, it looks for all the world like a broad and sluggish river, winding down between wide sweeps of parkland, punctuated by mature stands of trees. Nowadays, Welbeck College dinghies sail to and fro to add colour and life to the lake. Anglers fish its margins and, particularly in winter, a wealth of wildfowl are here. Immediately downstream from the Great Lake are the smaller Carberton Forge Dam and Carberton Dam, more enclosed and shaded by Nightingale Plantation and Corunna Hill Plantation. Beside the road between Norton Village and the Carberton Gates to Clumber Park stands the memorial to Lord George Bentinck, younger brother of the mysterious 5th Duke of Bentinck, at the place where his body was found in 1848. He had apparently died of a heart attack while walking to Thoresby to stay with his friend and neighbour Earl Manvers. In 1912, the 6th Duke had the memorial erected here, and appropriately, it is regularly the venue for a meet of the Rufford Forest Harriers. Horses have long played a major part in the Welbeck story, but of equal importance in the days of the 6th Duke was shooting. The estate and adjoining districts became famous for their pheasant and partridge, and the shoots organised in these golden years resulted in some remarkable bags. The open fields of Lyndhurst Farm, 2 miles southeast of Mansfield, produced the second largest bag of partridge for one day's shooting on October the 10th, 1906. There were 8 guns, including Lord Savile of Welbeck Abbey, and 1,504 partridges were shot. On November the 1st, 1911, the same area was shot by 6 guns, including the Duke of Portland and Lord Savile, and 1,205 partridges were taken. Writing in the mid-30s, in his fine book of memories entitled Men, Women and Things, the 6th Duke of Portland said that he was quite ashamed of the great number of pheasants sometimes killed by his shooting parties. On November the 9th, 1909, for instance, a party of guns, which included the Duke of Connaught and the Duke of Portland, shot 2,650 pheasants, at Clown Hill. On December the 6th, 1910, a smaller party, which included Prince Nicholas of Greece, Prince Löwenstein and the Duke of Portland, shot 3,507 pheasants at Leadthorpe, between Welbeck and Edwinstowe. This form of shooting, stated the Duke, he had no desire to repeat. The best type of covert shooting at Welbeck was considered to be at cock pheasant in a high wind in January. All forms of game birds were fostered on the estate from the arrival of the 6th Duke in 1879, and reference to game records shows this clearly. In 1879, only 5 partridge were shot, but in 1887, 2,119 were taken. In 1929, 6,698 partridge were bagged, and it is thought that more partridge have been shot over Blue Barn Lane near Welbeck than at any other place in England. The late Lieutenant Colonel Dennison of Ossington once told me about a day's shooting at Welbeck. He was quite young at the time and joined a party of guns in Welbeck Park. He wasn't a very good shot at the time and was rather worried that he wouldn't make a very good showing alongside more experienced men. The 6th Duke of Portland sat on a shooting stick, surrounded by several loaders and beaters, retrievers and spaniels at heel. Then the pheasants came out of the woodland ahead of them, but only about a dozen birds. Shots echoed across the park, and 1 or 2 birds dropped to the sward. The Duke was upset at this poor showing of birds and asked to see the keeper. He asked menacingly why there were so few birds, an awkward moment for the poor keeper. At that moment, the Marquis of Titchfield, the present Duke, strode out of the trees and said to the already annoyed Duke, "I say, Pop, this isn't much of a shoot. There seem to be more bow-wows than birds." The Duke turned purple with rage, and Colonel Dennison felt it likely that he would have used his own gun if he hadn't already passed it to one of his loaders. Although he hadn't hit a bird, Colonel Dennison's face had been saved by this diversion. Welbeck is the last estate of the Dukeries to be the home of a duke. It remains as a fine example of what has elsewhere passed into oblivion.